Hey, my name is Devin. We're here in Austin, Texas today. This is where my studio is, and I'm the founder of 3D for Designers. I am creating a place for designers and artists who are using 3D for creative work, and we're starting that by teaching designers how to do that. My background is in product design. I was the first designer at Codecademy and Treehouse, so those are education platforms. I was also an early-ish member of the Dropbox design team. I think I was number 4. A couple of years ago, I was kind of in this place where I wasn't as interested in the work I was doing, and in a way that was kind of a disappointment to me, because I think I had always grown up with this great excitement for technology and for art, and suddenly I felt like it wasn't for me anymore. And so I was at Dropbox and kind of found myself a product designer there and not really wanting to do product design anymore. After I left Dropbox and started seeking something new, seeking something that maybe would help to kind of fill that creative gap. The first time I ever used 3D, it was that lightning bolt of creativity where it starts in your gut and just out to your fingertips, where you made something for the first time. I hadn't felt that in so long, like since I was a teenager, the first time I made a website, right? That's how I felt about 3D. And so probably fundamentally 3D for Designers is about connecting the community I came from, connecting designers with that feeling that I get when I do stuff in 3D. I love 3D. Literally, you can make anything in your imagination in the world, any physical thing that you can conceptualize is replicable in 3D, any dream that you've ever had. There are tons of parallels between 2D design and 3D design. I think there's sort of the technical stuff, like any shape that you draw, for example, in 2D is, you could see that as a primitive in 3D. It's the same thing, we just have one more coordinate, right? So you have your X, your Y, and then also, boom, your Z, right? You got your depth. You know, you have a triangle, that's 2D, right? You have a pyramid, that's 3D, right? You have a circle, that's 2D. You have a sphere, that's 3D. And so we see the translation really clearly and easily. And a lot of design, especially when we're doing layout or something, we're thinking about geometric shapes. We're thinking about how to pare things down, how to make things simple, and that plays really well when you're working in the 3rd dimension. And then there's, say, paths in Illustrator or Photoshop, right? Paths sort of function the same way in both. Well, those exist in 3D also. They're called splines, exact same thing. They're just paths in 3D where we have these coordinates. So I found a lot of people are a little nervous about getting into 3D because they assume it's gonna break the budget. But actually, there is a pretty easy solution to that. If you have the full Creative Cloud subscription, you also have access to After Effects. And After Effects has Cinema 4D Lite. It's a complete 3D package. Actually, it's the equivalent of, almost the equivalent of Cinema 4D Prime, which costs about $1,000. So we're talking, say, if you just get one app with Creative Cloud, 20 bucks a month versus $1,000. So it's actually a pretty accessible way to do it. We've got VR, AR, projection mapping, game development. And we have a lot of things right now that we've heard of before, but are just now becoming more accessible. And a foundational skill common to all of these is 3D. Right? And so right now we don't see 3D as a requirement on job descriptions, but I think if you want to be ahead of the curve, 3D is actually a really important core skill that you're going to need. What we're working on at 3D for Designers is a very accessible course for designers specifically. We start with things that you know, like shape, form, repetition, line. We start with those concepts, those principles that exist already in design, and show you how they can be used in 3D. It's really easy to start with simple stuff, and then you can ramp up to the simulation or making things look realistic. You can do all of that later, and just start with things that, as a designer, you already know. Of course, when we look at like really complicated 3D, or we look at CGI, or we look at film, right? That stuff takes forever to render. You know, people have like entire setups dedicated to that. But you don't have to start there. In fact, you're bonkers if you try and start there. Instead, we can start with really simple stuff that, as designers, we're already familiar with, like shapes and lines, but not just like shapes and lines. Let's make something beautiful and interesting. And so I think that's what we're trying to show folks, is that it's actually really accessible to designers because they have this foundational knowledge, right? Where this is a medium. Who cares? Mediums are mediums. It's all about technical stuff, right? Technical stuff can be learned, but if you already have the vision, if you have a sense of strong visual design, bring that into 3D. Let me show you what you can do, you know? So I think the idea is to start with education, right? We start from this place where we can say, okay, if you're a designer and you're interested in 3D, come hang out. This is a place for you, right? My target audience are people like me, like people who came from a totally different space, whether it's graphic design or visual design or communication design or product design, but some way in which they have strong visual design chops and want to use them in this totally new medium and, you know, kind of want to get ahead of the curve when it comes to emerging tech. I think you have to be willing to have some grit to launch something. You have to be willing to sweat and get uncomfortable. I don't think there are any prerequisites for wanting to make something. We all make a stupid amount of mistakes in this I mean, like, I've been doing product design for like 10 years. In trying to create this, like, I fumbled and stumbled and was all over the place. I had to ask for help so many times from people who've done it before. It took me over a year to get this out there. I thought it would be much, much faster, to be honest. Like, when you look at the sheer number of hours that you're pulling, I did the calculations a couple times and decided never to calculate it again because it's clearly too much. But I was excited about what I was doing. I was motivated. You know, the whole sort of like dawn to dusk thing was working for me at the time. Now I'm like, you know, tapering off a little bit, like maybe I need to change my schedule. Things I thought, there were things that were a surprise to me that were hard. One was hiring a team and trying to hire support for what I was doing. You know, as with any team that you're managing and anytime you have people under you, there is so much you have to keep in mind about making their job great and giving them the right parameters. And then it was frustrating to me as someone who is multidisciplinary, that has a lot of different skills, to try and give pieces of that to other people and then feel like they weren't performing it at a high standard. I think that's always going to be a problem though, right? Where if you're good at a lot of stuff and then you ask someone to help you, you're gonna think, how would I have done it? I've had good mentors in my life. I don't currently have a mentor, but in the work that I've done in the past, I've had a couple of really good mentors and I've taken away lessons from them about how to run a business and how to develop and launch a product. I think for me, most importantly, how to care for people who are using your product and how to connect with them and how to have a genuine interest in their well-being and where they land when they're interacting with you or your brand or your stuff. I take that with me in what I'm doing now and I think about it often. I see the site launching as like, whew, cool, got that done. But it is, just the sort of foundation of something I'm building on top of. So that's great. I have a platform, right? And so now I've got to actually like build the stuff that goes on top of it, right? We plug it in the Legos. I think the definition of having a life varies from person to person. For me, living a full life is like creating things I'm really excited and passionate about and like doing that often, maybe every day if I can, right? Being productive and like putting something worthwhile into the world. That's what makes me feel good. That's what makes me feel alive. And so when people say, did you work a lot or do you have a life? I'm like, same thing, right? Like for me, it's all part of like the bigger, broader goal. Like my sort of life mission is to help people be more creative with technology. So this is fulfilling the life mission. I think if you want to launch a product, you got to be willing to tap into discipline, tap into grit, and tap into sweat. Founders' lives look so nice and pretty and shiny on TV. They really do, right? There's so much involved. I think especially having your heart tied all up in something that also relates to your well-being and your business and everything else is a big undertaking, but not one I would discourage anybody from trying. It's also like the most fulfilling thing I've ever done in my life. I feel like I'm on my life mission right now, which is perfect. So I would say, get ready for the hard stuff, but don't let anybody shy away from it.